not to jump the gun, but we're obviously going to talk about the two Maple Leafs prospects who have made this team. But I think that's why a player like Fraser Minton could be so important to this team as, a shutdown center playing in a role where, he might not be afforded a ton of offensive opportunity, but he will grind guys down. And that's, the reason why he got a shot in the NHL at the start of the year. And that's the reason why he made this team as one of the locks, really. Like when you look at this team, I first look at the 2004 born forwards, the returning players or the players who were eligible last year who didn't make the team. So Owen Beck, we mentioned, is the only returning player on the roster, second rounder from Montreal in 2022. It's basically just the other guys from that 2022 draft who are in this category, I would say, of like the guys that we expect to be horses for this team. So I'm looking at a Jordan Dumais, a guy who, we've talked about a bunch on this podcast as a guy who has, been tearing up the QMJHL and looks like an absolute steal of that draft. Connor Geekie, who, Case, I'm not sure if you mentioned earlier or if that was off air, but he'll be another guy relied on. And then Matthew Savoy, who, Harper, well. So those are just some of the locks up front who we expect to be horses. And then on the back end, I'm looking at players from the same draft, and the number one guy I'm looking at is Denton Mateychuk. We talked about leading up to that 2022 draft of him being, sort of an underrated player. He went 12th overall, but I know I certainly had him in my top 10 when I was doing draft rankings. You guys might have as well too. Like he was a very highly anticipated prospect, and he just adds to that Columbus blue line. So those are some guys who I'm looking to really carry this team.
Yeah, Mateychuk, he's a guy that plays on both ends very well. Like he's not one of the guys that they have to worry about selecting a Sabrango or a Del Mastro over. He's put up 175 points in 175 WHL games.
Yeah, I was going to say he's pretty good offensively too.
But he can play in his own end, and he plays very smart. And it's so important in this tournament to have a guy like that on the back end. And, every single year the Canadians have some sort of player like that. When you think of a Jamie Drysdale or Bowen Byram last year or 2 years ago, and
Olin
Zellweger last year, they always have that one stud defenseman. And I guess I'm going to spoil it, but I was picking Denton Mateychuk as my player to watch for Canada for that exact reason. I think he's going to be a top 3 player on this team.
Okay, before we get into players to watch, Harper, why don't you sort of give us your thoughts on everything we've been talking about? I haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I get it in a sense that this team, look, I do see them winning a medal. Certainly gold is not guaranteed like it has been in years past. I get it. But look, it's a great opportunity for someone to come out of the woodwork and really step up. And there are a couple of names that come to mind. Joshua Waugh is one from last year. Montreal Canadiens late round pick. He was excellent for this team. And then another guy I look at was Tyson Hines, a defenseman. Again, another Anaheim Ducks draft pick or whatever, and their blue line is well represented on this team once again with Tristan Luneau, who got into some NHL games this season early on with Anaheim, and a guy by the name of Noah Warren as well. Big right shot D2 who I could kind of see, having an impact on this team, maybe on your third pair or whatever, very similar to Tyson Hines. So Anaheim's blue line, their future back there is certainly well represented once again on this Canadian team and in this tournament. But I think it's a group that will need to get it done by committee. I think the forward group is certainly going to be the main focus with Celebrini and Geekie, Savoy, the list goes on. But I do like this blue line and very interested to see how this defense core performs. Not just Mateychuk, but the two names that I just mentioned, the two Anaheim prospects. Maverick Lamoureux is a guy I'm going to be keeping an eye on as well. 6'7", big defender. He was a first rounder late of the Arizona Coyotes, and look, you always love to have players who are big and have that big long reach in a tournament like this where you have a lot of younger players. So look, it might be one of those teams where you don't have the same star power as you've had in years past, and particularly last year with a guy like Bedard. But there's enough there where everybody, if they pitch in, that they can do something special again this year.
Yeah, and that's, the way I look at it, I've grown to trust the staff of Team Canada over the last few years and the guys that they've been picking and leaving out at times. And to just look at some of the guys they left off of this team that they could have picked that are tearing up their respective leagues, it makes me think, they saw at camp something in these guys, this specific team that worked well together, that's going to win games, and I'm going to put my faith in them when I'm watching.
Mm-hmm. You hope that's the case, right? Because if it's not, then you wonder why a guy like, a guy that I pointed out when I was doing my prep notes that you mentioned was Jagger Firkus, having a great year in the WHL. So you've got to think that, hopefully the coaching staff notices something in other players, and specifically maybe an undrafted player like Owen Allard, who I believe is the only undrafted player on this team, if I did my notes right. Maybe that's why he earns a spot over a guy like Jagger Firkus, who will get another crack at it next year.
You're right, other than the two Q goalies and Celebrini, obviously.
Yeah, that's right.